All right. Well, hello, and first of all, welcome to Auburn University. And I will say I'm Kevin Robinson, as you see on the screen here, with the Office of Audit, Compliance, and Privacy. And certainly I wish I was coming to you in a different format, because one of the things I really enjoy doing is coming and meeting all of our new employees here at New Employee Orientation. But I am glad that I can share a few things that I think will help you be successful here at Auburn University. And let me say, most groups that I speak to in new employee orientation, you probably have some expectations for the kinds of people you will hear from. And one of those expectations will not be that you hear from somebody that has the words audit and compliance and privacy in their title. So you're probably wondering why I have a few minutes with you. But I think if you can stick with me and give me about 10 or 15 minutes, what I have to say will actually help you be successful here at Auburn University. Because when you ask the people that work in our office what their job is, their job really is to help Auburn University be successful. And that's what we want you to be. Because one of the things that I tell groups when I speak at events about higher education is that our world has changed dramatically over the last few years. And you see on your slides there, you see a number of headlines that have occurred in higher education over the past few years. And I could update this slide basically every day from institutions where people have made bad decisions that led to problems for that institution. And let me give you an example. You see the slide where it has the gentleman picture there, UCLA professor strikes deal in lab fire case, avoids prison. The guy you see on the right of that picture was a chemistry professor at UCLA doing the same things that chemistry professors do at institutions across the country all the time. He taught classes, he had graduate students, and he did research. And one evening in his lab that he was responsible for, a young lady was doing some work there and a fire breaks out in the lab. Her clothing catches on fire and she's severely burned. 18 days later, she dies from the injuries in that fire. Now, did this gentleman, this professor, imagine that ever happening? Certainly not. He didn't think anything like that, never expected anything like that to occur. Well, the state of California charges this professor with criminal law violations basically for three things. They said, number one, you had this young lady working in your lab and you didn't provide her the right training that she should have had before she did that work. Number two, you didn't provide her the right safety equipment to wear while she did that work. And number three, you didn't have the right safety equipment in the lab to begin with. And this was your lab, and therefore it's your fault. Is that unusual? Yeah, very unusual. And for 7 years, every day this chemistry professor woke up, he faced the possibility of going to prison because the state of California said, you didn't do your job. Again, an extreme case. And he did not go to prison, by the way. He wrote a check for $30,000 and agreed to 400 hours of community service. An extreme case, but it makes a point that we're seeing throughout higher education. You see the story just below him. Lauren McCluskey's parents file a $56 million lawsuit against University of Utah. That is a case where the parents of this young lady who was murdered said she came to the institution seeking help, worried about a former partner of hers, and she was concerned. And her parents have sued the institution saying, you should have done something to help our daughter and you didn't do it. Now, will they win $56 million? I don't know, but I'm just saying we've seen a trend over the past few years where the expectations that we make good decisions for the people that are either participating in our programs or visiting our campuses have dramatically increased. And so that's important for you to understand this is going on in our industry. You probably saw over the last few years the Michigan State case. What you might not know is not only is Larry Nassar in prison, but his boss was sentenced to prison. William Strample, the dean over that area, you see there, he was the first official tied to Nassar to be convicted. And when you read what he was convicted on, one of those things is willful neglect of duty. And that's a phrase that you're seeing more and more for administrators and people that work in higher education. You have a duty to make good decisions really about risk. And that's one of the things. One, we want you to be aware of that. And number two, we want you to be to help us make good decisions for Auburn, because we want to be proactive in managing risk. We really want to avoid being the headline. And this is a topic, again, that I speak on at events throughout higher education all over the country. Now, a few years ago, I was shopping, or not shopping, I was speaking at an event down in Florida. And before I spoke, the vice president of marketing for Publix grocery stores did a talk. And it was very interesting as they talked about the organizational culture. And if we were together, I'd ask you some questions. I have an audience here with me. But when you go to Publix, give me an adjective to describe Publix. Pleasant. Helpful. Friendly. And you've probably have had the experience at some time of walking around Publix and clearly not knowing where you are, and an employee sees you. And generally, that employee is going to come up to you and they're going to say, sir or ma'am, can I help you find something? And if you said, I'm looking for the bread, they don't say aisle 7. They take you to that place. And then they don't even leave you alone. They say, is there something else I can help you find? That is unusual. And it goes back to the corporate philosophy that George Jenkins, the guy that founded Publix, that's how he built this into this organization. And that's why for over 30 years, they've been number 1 or number 2 in customer service ratings for their industry. It's a fascinating story to me in organizational culture. And I heard that and I thought, that's really a good philosophy because when you think about it, every organization you're a part of is either a little better because you're part of it or you make it a worse group. And we don't always think of it. It's pretty good philosophy when you think about it. And so I wrote that down, even though I'm about to go on and speak, I wrote that down because I just thought it's so profound. And then I started thinking about it, this topic of how we manage risk. Auburn's going to be better at managing risk or not as good because of you and the decisions you make every day. And so we hope that you'll make good decisions because higher ed hasn't always been proactive and made the best decisions. You see another story here of a bonfire accident that occurred in 1999 at Texas A&M. And if you know a little bit about that institution, this was one of probably the top tradition at Texas A&M. For years, students would build a giant structure out of logs, and then the night before they had their big rivalry game against the University of Texas, there'd be a big pep rally, they'd have the bonfire, just a great thing that brought that campus together. Well, on November 18th, 1999, as those students are building this thing, it collapsed, and when it did, 12 students died and 27 were injured. 12 students, just like those walking our campus here at Auburn University, 12 families forever changed in addition to the people that were injured there. And so Texas A&M asked, how could something that's such a good part of our culture and such a great thing that brought everybody together result in something so tragic? And they put together a group to look at this. How could this happen? And when you read the report, it has this statement in there. It says, organizational failure contributed to the bonfire accident. And when you read what that's about, you'll find out that a lot of people knew there was something wrong with how this was being done, but nobody said anything. And so nobody said anything had disastrous consequences. And you see that a lot in higher ed. And by the way, this is a very important story in higher ed in our history, but I'm not picking on Texas A&M. If you look at Texas A&M today, they're probably, I think, one of the best schools nationally at managing student activities risk. And the reason they're so good at managing student activities risk is because on November 18th, 1999, their world changed. And by the way, litigation went on for 9 years in this case. And when you think about our mission in higher ed, our mission is really a very noble mission because what we do with education is we change lives, and it changes generations of lives. When you think about it, particularly we have an emphasis on first-generation college students here at Auburn as a land-grant institution. Second thing with research, who knows what might be discovered here that would change folks, the quality of life for people worldwide. Could happen here at Auburn. And so that's another noble thing. And you think about the outreach mission we have as a land grant. When you look at that, that's really to improve the quality of life for the people in the state of Alabama. That's a good thing. Alabama being a poor state, there are a lot of people that we can help and help improve the quality of their life. Those are all three primary, that's really, when you think about it, that's our mission, to educate, to research, and for outreach. And that's a noble thing. And when we're doing that, we're spending our money the way we want to. But if we have tragedy like they had at Texas A&M, or we have any of those headlines, we're going to be spending our money on investigations and on settlements and things like that, not the thing that really is good for the whole state and for everybody to be spending their money on. And so that's why I come largely, is because we're trying to develop a culture at Auburn where we're proactive. And so one of the things that I would suggest that you do is let somebody know if you're ever aware of an issue. And I'll talk more about that in just a second. A few other things I want you to be aware of. As an Auburn University employee, you are subject to the state of Alabama ethics law. You've got an excerpt there on your slide, but the main summary of that is you cannot use your position for personal gain. And you may think, well, what does that mean? Well, that's the confusing part. And so our suggestion is, if you are ever unsure of something and whether it violates the ethics law, call our office and let us help you, because the Ethics Commission is much more aggressive today than they were a few years ago in what they're pursuing. We're seeing issues that are investigated now by the state that years ago they probably wouldn't have investigated. So it's a very important law for you to be aware of. The other thing, if your salary is above $81,000 per year budgeted, you have within 30 days to do some ethics training, and we provided you the link there. That is between you and the Ethics Commission. I tell people Auburn University will never be found guilty of ethics charges. Individuals will be found guilty of ethics charges. And that's one of the things you're required to do. You go through that training, and I'll be honest, it's not very good. It's pretty boring, and the Ethics Commission will tell you it's pretty boring. But at the end of it, you print a certificate, and you keep that, and if the Ethics Commission ever asks you, that's your evidence that you attended that training. So that's just one of the things you need to be aware of. A few other things to be aware of. We have a bid law in the state of Alabama. That's another thing you've got to be aware of. If you're involved in procurement, anything above $15,000 has to be bid. So make sure you work with the procurement professionals. Even if a vendor says, I will break this up in 3 or 4 invoices so it looks like it's below $15,000. That is a terrible idea. Even if a vendor says it, make sure you know, because you'll notice in our policy right there, Auburn University assumes no liability if you choose to violate the law. So that's one of those things. And I wish there weren't vendors that would be willing to try to get around the system, but there are. And so you need to be aware of that. Second thing is contract authority. You don't have it. That's the short answer. You can't sign a contract for Auburn University. Don't feel bad. Only the president can sign contracts, and a few people that he has specifically delegated specific types of contracts. So unless you're one of those folks, don't sign a contract, because you actually obligate yourself, not Auburn University. Another thing you need to know, we're very serious now about data privacy and security. You see breaches at organizations throughout the country virtually every day. Well, we have a lot of data. We have 30,000 students here, 6,000 at AUM, 6,000 employees roughly. That's a lot of data we have, and we want to protect it. So one of the things you'll need to do is, if you ever suspect a breach, is to let someone know. You also have some training that's required. And so we hope that well, it is not optional, it's required. And I'll be honest, that's one of those things we added after we had a breach a few years ago. So if you had an affiliation with Auburn, you may have been one of the 367,000 records that were exposed. Well, we don't want to do that again. Breaches are very expensive. You might not know this. A data breach that we would have at Auburn, because we have students from all 50 states, we have to deal with 50 different state laws and 50 different offices of the Attorney General. And so that gets very expensive. So we're very serious about protecting data now. Then the other thing that's important for you to understand, and you've probably already gotten an email about this, is we have a conflict of interest disclosure statement that is required for all employees every year. You have 30 days of being hired to fill that out. It is not an optional thing, and then you'll update it every October. But if you have changes during the year, we want you to update it then. And you've seen many stories about conflicts of interest and that nature in higher ed. Some of those headlines are related to conflict of interest issues. So we're trying to be proactive, and it's not that we're trying to get in your business, so to speak. We're trying to help you not run afoul of some of these things, whether it's ethics law, or whether it's certain federal or state regulations that can come into play. So if you have a conflict of interest, that doesn't mean you've done anything wrong. It means you have a conflict of interest, and we want to help you manage it proactively so you don't run into trouble later on. So help us in that by getting those disclosed quickly. And then probably within the compliance world, the last 5 years, at least within higher ed, probably the biggest topic has been our Title IX sexual misconduct issues. And by the way, this is going to be one that changes. So you may have training coming up in the next year. But as of the law, as of today, anyone at a university campus is required to report sexual misconduct. So if a student comes to you and says, I was assaulted last night, you're required to let the Title IX office know. That is not optional. So you can do that one of several ways. You can call that office, you can email them, and I think they even have a way from their website where you can contact them there. So that's one of the things. And my advice to people, whether I'm speaking at Auburn or at things at other places, is if you're ever not sure, contact those folks because they pay attention to that law. And it has been in flux over the last year, and changes are coming in August unless they decide not to do the changes. So let the people that manage this, because it's a complex area of law, let them help you navigate that. All right. Now, one of the things that I mentioned earlier is if you're aware of a problem, we hope you'll let somebody know. Generally speaking, we hope you'll let whomever you report to in the organization know. But if you're in a situation where I don't think I can go to my superior or my leadership for wherever I work at Auburn, there's some other options you can do. Number one, you can call me. You can call our office and we'll even provide you my cell phone. You can call me anytime. I keep it with me and I give my business cards. If we were here together, you would have a business card. So we can put that in the material that goes out with this. Because I would much rather you call me, even if it's not my issue, and me connect you with the right people to avoid that headline than us have a problem there. But if you didn't want to do that, you see on this webpage up at the top right, report a concern. That's another thing you can do. And you can get to our anonymous reporting system. It's a site called Ethics Point hosts this. It's hosted externally. It's completely anonymous. Excuse me. And you just click on whichever category. If you're not sure, just call it other. And all of those are followed up on and handled from our office or the appropriate office. So that's another thing you can do. But again, we're serious about this. That's why we come to every new employee orientation. President's office knows we do this. The Board of Trustees knows that I come here every week and talk to people. That's how serious we are about it. And we need your help in doing that. Now, a few other resources there that might help you that we put in your handout from a compliance standpoint or policies and procedures, because Auburn's may be unique from wherever you came from another institution you may have came here from. So those are some things you need to be aware of. Now, I did that little story about Publix earlier just because it kind of fits into what we want here. But a few months after I did that talk down in Florida and heard that Publix vice president talk about their culture, I saw this clip, and it's a good way to wrap up what we're really talking about today.
With a smile, and sometimes it's just the smallest gesture that can mean so much.
So I think a lot of us shop at different grocery stores, but I know a lot of us shop at Publix, right? Well, it's an image that one shopper captured at a Publix in Florida that is going viral. Keith Keel snapped this photo at the Publix in Ormond and sent it to us. The photo he took shows an act of kindness by a young man named Gage, a Publix employee who in this picture is tying the shoe of an elderly shopper. Keel says he watched as the older man could not reach down to tie his shoe, so Gage dropped to the ground and not only tied one shoe, but did the other one as well with a smile. Keel snapped a photo of it because he says it was so unusual to witness something like this. So he shared that photo with us, and now it has taken off around the country.
There's a couple things here. The first thing is for the Publix employee to even notice that.
Right.
And to me, that is such a stroke of humanity. You know, it's a simple thing, but really, just to notice it.
I also think it's a tender gesture. You normally see mamas tying their baby shoes, or maybe a hospital worker. So I just very
fantastic.
Yeah, good for Gage.
Now, what you saw there, the young man you saw in that clip's named Gage. And Gage sees this older gentleman who his shoes are untied as he's shopping there. And nowhere in Gage's job description is tying customers' shoes. But culturally, he knew that man's experience would be a little better if he took action there. And that's really what we're talking about, is when you're aware of something, that you'll do that. And to be honest, I think Auburn's a great place because of great people, but if we approach our job like Gage did that day, Auburn would be even greater if we just did that from the human standpoint every day that you're working at Auburn. So I do appreciate you being here. And if we can help you in any way, certainly reach out to our office, and we hope you have a great experience here at Auburn University. So thank you for listening.